insights that can only be approved if you step back and reflect on the problem, right? So, but we start with the apparent ones first. So, the apparent ones is clearly this, yeah? There are different technical options on the table. You could pump the water out, and then they can sort of, saunder out, quite, relaxed manner. You could drill through the mountains and hopefully reach the boys in time. You could teach them how to dive, to swim, and then to dive, and then one by one you kind of bring them out. Or you can sort of open your door to Elon Musk, portable submarine, and hopefully this could sort of rescue the boys. Yeah. But the different design choices here all imply a different risk and harm profile. Yeah. So it means that you are not likely to find that they benefit or risk the people that you are trying to help in similar ways. Yeah? And importantly, because they differ, real stakes are involved, which means that you can't quite know exactly how it would all pan out, but you know that the different choices means that you're presenting different risks and harm to the people you're trying to help. Okay, so this is an important thing. Then you heard the newscaster say, likely you're kind of confronted with a difficult situation where people would say, the people who sort of study wicked problems, they'll say, this is a one-shot operation. This means that you can't quite do a safe aim and then go back to the original spot. Yeah, whatever you do is consequential in this following ways, which means that you are kind of kick-starting a line of action in which there are permanent consequences. The resources that you use are not in a laboratory condition, or they are sort of unlimited supply. It means that if you use the resources up this round, you have no resources for the next round. Yeah? And then you have definitely incomplete information, which means that you can't quite know all the resultant consequences that would sort of develop once you sort of kickstart a particular line of action. So you know something, you know the contours of the problem, but you don't have the sort of the key information that will sort of allow you to make a decisive decision between A, B, or C, or D. Yeah? And then of course you have the uncertainties that is of a particular kind. It pertains to the assemblage of how humans work with machines. Yeah? So it's not only about human competency that you're looking at basically the contextual and contingent combination of how, for example, a diver is using the wetsuit, the tank, in a particular condition. There are things that can go wrong in that combination, right? So in practical ethics, we call all these non-ideal conditions, yeah? And this is very important because for those of you who have sort of done maybe some cursory reading in ethics, you know that philosophers tend to sort of abstract a situation and they assume that the people involved in the decision making are rational, and that there is really a vacuum around in which decisions are being made. But this luxury is not given to designers or people who are involved in practical situations, where most of the time, if you look at what has happened before during the COVID-19, we are still in the midst of it, you know that decisions have to be made despite that the conditions are not ideal. Yeah? So this is the kind of problems that I think engineers, designers who are sort of enmeshed in a practical situation is likely to find themselves in. Okay, so these are the not so obvious ones. This is just my own outcome of my own homework. It does not need to follow that point. But I thought that as I was sort of reflecting on this case, I stepped back. It seems that there are a couple of options on the table for the rescuers. Yeah, I named them A, B, C, but ultimately it didn't happen that they choose any of them. It was probably B. Okay, but A would be to say that okay, as a group of rescuers come together, they would look at what their technical components or their technologies allow them to do, and then from there they deduce a line of action. So which means that you study the specifications, the performance of your existing technology, and then you say that okay, this is what is allowed for me to do, and therefore I follow that what it allows me to do. Okay, so this is A, right? Then B, you are saying that okay, currently, based on the specifications of the challenges, there's no technology in the world that allows me to do that. So I have to try some new technologies. So for example, the portable bullet-like submarine that you saw earlier, right? And then C, you can say, okay, why don't we be a little bit more pragmatic? We allow interplay. We explore options simultaneously, and hopefully one catches our eye, one becomes more promising, and we go for that. But as I mentioned, on hindsight, the rescuers did not choose A, B, or C. They chose a variant of A, yeah? But it was the impending rain that forced their hand. And then they chose the riskiest option, which is A, existing technology, existing competency, and they trained the boys to swim and then dive and then took them out. Yeah? Okay. So then, if you think about it, whether you choose option A, B, or C, they are not actually only informed by technical considerations, but they are all ethical choices. And in a sense that it means that whichever choice you take, you're likely to imply or to sort of impose benefits, risk, and harm in very different ways. Okay? So in that sense, it is an ethical choice. And it is only by making this ethical choice can you begin to refine the technical considerations or the technologies that are required for that particular choice scenario. Right? So this is the not so obvious one. Later on, I will show you a table, a chart for this problem, and I have sort of more or less left out the, as a sort of a blank on what to do, how to think about your own problem in the not so obvious, not so apparent sense. This is the work that you have to do, because only by surfacing some of the not apparent factors and dimensions of the problem can you, I suppose, create a more profound design for the problem. Okay, so to introduce to all of you practical ethics, yeah? I mean, you hear all these academic terms. What does practical ethics mean? Practical ethics sit between the poles of applied ethics, which is maybe what I do, academic scholarly ethics, which the purpose is to clarify the problem and to think about some of the ethical dimensions of that, yeah? So this is what applied ethicists or philosophers do. Then on the other pole, you have professional ethics. You probably don't have to worry about that until you're all certified engineers, but professional ethics have to do something with codes, yeah? And you have to abide by the codes so that you protect your client's interests as well as the interests of the society. But practical ethics is about applying moral concepts to practical situations in order to derive a line of action. This is the kind of ethics that I think you are going to be encountering. For example, someone comes up to you and says, hey, so-and-so has this problem, this is about euthanasia, this is about abortion. Based on your inkling on ethics, what line of action would you recommend? Yeah? This is basically practical ethics. And you'll find that designers tend to work in the rank between practical ethics and professional ethics. Okay? So this is important. And I think practical ethics is particularly salient under, let's say, the everyday situation of uncertainty, scarcity of resources, lack of information, the lack of clarity on the purpose. So interestingly, practical ethics, I think, coincide with what Caroline Whitbeck, who is a philosopher, ethicist in engineering school long ago, called ethics as design. Yeah? So what it means is that as designers, you don't have the luxury of adopting the judge's perspective, which means that you are trying to say, okay, in this ethical problem, these are the people who is right, these are the people who is wrong, and we can sort of leave it at that. Yeah? But as designers, you are charged with producing a solution, a response to a particular problem, right? And in that sense, it is the need of that response or the quality of the response that make it a practical problem, right? Interestingly, Whitbeck reminds us that designers are given a particular potential, a particular strength that philosophers or applied ethicists like myself do not have. You are able, as designers, to create a design that can reconcile competing demands. But usually for philosophers, they will take it that the conflicting demands are irresolvable, and you have a dilemma, you've got to choose A or B. Yeah? But as designers, you can create C, which means that you have a component, a system that can sort of reconcile demands that pull in opposite directions. I give you one, right? So for example, as a designer, you don't have to choose between the spoon or the fork. You can design a sport, okay? Or you don't have to decide whether you want to have a snow pit tent or then you can sort of create a camper van. Yeah. So these are design compromises. So compromises means you don't have the best of both worlds. Yeah. But nonetheless, through design, you are able through the tools of design to solve some of the hardest, most competing demands that stumble philosophers or applied ethicists. Okay, this is the most academic of my slide, right? So if you want to sort of get into the sort of the thick of ethics, what are some of the frameworks that you've got to think about? I have three here, right? I will begin with consequentialism because I think this is the primary ethical frame for designers slash engineers, yeah? After all, you have been engaged to produce a result, a set of consequences which you think is most ideal and which furthermore is free from unanticipated or undesirable consequences. So I think consequentialism cannot be out of the picture of an engineer interested in ethics. Yeah. So consequentialism in an academic term is defined by the ethical quality of actions by the extent which they attain or further certain goals. Yeah. So it's goal-oriented, right? Result-oriented. So a branch of consequentialism is utilitarianism. You probably know this, right? This is only one of the many. This is about maximizing the good for the most number of people. Then in contrast, you have something called deontological ethics. And in deontological ethics, the frame defines the ethical action not in terms of the goal it produced, but based on something else. Yeah. So usually it means a duty. Deontological is basically a big word for duty ethics. So deontological ethics equals the duty ethics. Yeah? So for example, I made a promise for you, to you to do something, and I will do it despite of the consequences or the cost to me. Right? So deontological ethics is in a sense quite oppositional to consequentialism. In philosophy, because of their opposing nature, the tendency is to choose one or the other. But there's a problem with this binary matrix, yeah? Because if you think about it, if you are forced to choose one or the other, you could be, let's say, a radical consequentialist who would say, let me attain the maximum good, but but in the meantime, in order to attain the maximum good, there is a need for me to harm a minority of people, which some people have said that this is a repugnant outcome. Okay. On the other hand, if you are a strict deontologist, you say, okay, the rules and the principles say this, and to hell that may be, I'm going to sort of abide by the rules and principles. Yeah. So in certain societies, for example, just use a popular issue now on gun control. It is your legal and moral, perhaps arguably a moral right for you to bear arms. Yeah. But increasingly, if guns proliferate in a society, you would have consequences that are perhaps unpalatable. So you see, the binary positions are not useful and relevant for the thinking of the designers. I think it's more prudent and I think more practical to think about something in between. So which means that these are bookends offered to you. You should be able to kind of come up with a more pliable, more practically savvy, wise position for your particular problem. Okay, so these are bookends. Then third, you have something called risk ethics. And this is relatively new, just came out maybe 10, 15 years ago. Not much work has been done, a couple of literature here and there. But I think this is very important, particularly now. Yeah? And risk ethics at the moment, the science of it is not yet statistical or mathematical, which means that there's no numbers in it yet. Yeah? The science or the theory behind it is a little bit more chunky. And they basically emphasize this set of following questions. Yeah? So what new risks are created even by ethical action? So recently in the journal Nature, there was a study that actually tried to examine the fungal and bacterial infection of mask wearing. Yeah? So we all know that putting this on protects you, but really you're putting it on to protect other people as well. Yeah? So you can say that prima facie on the surface, this is an ethical action. But however, for the immunocompromised people, this is actually imposing a risk on yourself. Because you are now, based on the study in Nature, if you're immunocompromised, the bacterial and fungal infection will actually grow here, and you forget to sort of change your mask, you'll probably be susceptible to some kind of pathologies. So, and then following that, who or what bears the risk? You will find that the risks and benefits are usually of not the same party. Nothing to do with I have nothing against smokers in this room, but to kind of use it as a vivid example. If you think about it, the person who's actually smoking is enjoying the joy of the cigarette. Yeah? But however, the second-hand smoke is born by someone else. So the people who is actually enjoying the risk, the benefit of smoking, is not the one who is the only one affected by the risk of smoking. The risk is also burdened on some of them. So you want to ask, is the risk burden fair? Should we actually impose this new risk on people who otherwise have nothing to do with it? Okay. And there's a sub point. This risk ethics consists of something called moral law, right? Again, not well researched, but it goes something like that. So if you think about it, there are probably doctors among us today who wish that they had not lived to see such times. Yeah? Who probably wake up in the morning and say that, had I been a doctor 20 years ago, I would not need to kind of wrestle with the ethical quandaries of treating people in the hospital that has very little resources. I have to choose who lives, who dies. Yeah? Or, for example, think about the war in Ukraine. There are probably people put into taxing situations on a daily basis and who probably wake up every morning thinking that they would have preferred not to see such times. Yeah? So, but however, whatever they do, their moral actions are, however, evaluated by factors which is beyond their control, which is basically the environment and the times in which they were born into. So moral luck has something to do with a kind of randomness that is taken into account in our moral judgment, but which, however, resides beyond the agent's volition, will, or control. Yeah? You don't have to think so much about moral luck by putting that risk ethics in terms of these chunky questions would apply to your problem. Okay, so I know that you have not been introduced to the problem. I'll let Rob do more of the filling in, but this is basically the problem. Okay, so. The problem is the design of a vaccine-active thermal management system. Tell me if I'm inaccurate. Yeah? Okay, right? And there are two countries, okay, and they are all in imaginary countries, but you can sort of find your empirical correlates, right? Wakanda and Singa system, right? So these two countries came to Singapore and asked for help, right? You have only this limited amount of reagents. This is the number, the capacity of shots that you can produce with the reagents, and you have to choose which one you think you should help and design the system that most best corresponds to the challenges of that particular choice. Right? Okay. So the first three rows from the chart, I can share the slide later. You don't have to, copy on here. The first three rows are facts of the problem, right? The obvious one, I do the homework for you. You don't have to wrestle with it because this is clear. That if you think about it, if you, for example, you say, I'm going to help Wakanda, right? More people will receive the vaccines because there's a lot more people involved. The overall global vaccine equity will improve, but you have nothing left if someone asks you for help in a more urgent situation. Yeah? But however, if you say, I'm going to help Singa sister, fewer people receive the vaccines, but however, you're helping the more vulnerable ones because they tend to be older. You can think of the population age distribution curve mapped on the x and y axis this way, right? So on the x-axis is the age, on the y is the population. Singa sister is the inclined curve, yeah? And if you just flip and reflect, Wakanda is the opposite of that, right? So you're actually helping the more vulnerable aged people, but however, that is a form of equity as well, but it's not the same kind of equity, right? So if you think about it, it's really starting to pull in two different directions. But however, you have redundancy to help other people, right? So the not so obvious ones are they are just fillers. This is your homework. This is the part where you have to put your neurons to work, right? But a point about that, it may appear that we are subjecting this to a binary consideration, which means that you are choosing A or B or B or A. This is only the starting point, right? I see this as bookends. It is up to you to define what is the problem and to design the system that best corresponds to the problem that you have defined, right? So for example, we have not made any, we have not provided any details on how many planes you can use, whether you can use a ferry, whether you can come up with a system that is modifiable in part to both help both countries. Yeah? This is really key, right? But I don't think you need to kind of see this in terms of the binary construct of the way the problem is being set, right? Okay, so for the purpose of this, yes, you have a question.
I have a question.
Sure.
But what about cost?
Okay.
Shouldn't cost be like a factor? I mean, if one country can pay me more, then obviously I will sell to the country. Solve a lot of problems.
Yes, no. I hear you, okay, but later on, let me tackle the questions later on. But I hear you, yeah? Your question is something on cost, and to say that if Singapore were to give out these 240 million doses, what is left for us? That's the question, yeah?
No, it's if I were to give the vaccines, I would expect which option to pay me more, right? Because I would also want to have my benefit as well.
Oh, okay. My understanding is that this is humanitarian aid. There's no claim. Yeah. Okay. But there will be room for answers and questions later on. But let me get through this, yeah? Okay, so to kind of help me think about the problem a little bit more, I prepared a list of, let's say, approaches or systematic ways in which you can start to tackle this problem. Okay? Okay, the first is that I think you have to clarify the problem and to define exactly what is your problem. Is your problem about helping a particular country in which you not only have some reserves left, but that you can fulfill, let's say, your lowest baseline ethical commitment to the country, and yet has the reserve to help another country, yeah? And so your design of the system must reflect this set of challenges as potential. Or conversely, it's the other way, right? So the idea here is that you probably want to start by thinking about the problem first, thinking about what is the initial position, and hopefully through conversation within your group, this is a group project, right? Yeah. You can come to a more refined understanding of what the problem is, right? And then from there, you can hopefully adjust your ethical position again. I don't think you are beholden to your initial moral position. It's probably very rare that your moral position does not change along the way. Okay, so give yourself some room on being more pliable along the way. Right? Okay, and then after that, importantly, you need to find out, or think about how to justify your position. This is of utmost importance, which means that I suppose all of us are interested to hear from you to say that, okay, I'm designing this particular system this way because the specifications and the configuration of the system correspond to the challenges that is required or seen in a particular ethical position. So we need to kind of see that correspondence link between your design and your position. Okay? Importantly on this, you should consider and anticipate some of the important moral disagreements you are likely to encounter when you hypothetically share your ideas in the public. So we are trying to kind of make this as realistic as it should be. You're likely to, you will probably realize that given that this is a very costly venture, you are likely to have many different ethical moral positions against your particular goal. Yeah? So you should anticipate some of that and think about how to sort of respond to that. This is an exercise, but it is likely something that you are going to encounter should you be placed in a position to make such a weighty decision. Okay, and subsequently, blind spots. All of us have our blind spots. The lonely ethicist working in solitude probably has the biggest blind spot of all. Yeah. But however, if there are 4 or 5 of you in the group, you can use and leverage on your group members to minimize this blind spot. Right. So you want to ask yourself and your friends, what are some of the blind spots of your position? What can be used to correct that blind spot? What are some of the uncertainties or ambiguities in that position? And hopefully, through deliberation, you should diminish this to as low a level as possible. This is of utmost importance. Yeah? So you realize that back to the cave example, there are blind spots in teaching the boys how to swim and then dive and then taking them out one by one. Let's just say that moral luck play a role, okay? Now, no one got hurt or only one of the divers died in the process. That is a tragedy. But you could imagine that a lot more boys would have died in such an unprecedented event. And finally, saliency. This is a point on the communicativeness of your presentation. This is more for the instructors than for you, but it is also good for you to sort of think about how to communicate the features of your design project such that you say that, okay, this is a particular feature that can be mapped onto a particular position in ethics. Yeah? And then you want to make it salient for us so that the instructors or anyone looking at your project don't have to go into the design or time for it. Right? Okay, so this is basically a starting list, but through your own thinking, you probably can come to more. Right? So I will conclude that with a quote by Thomas Nigel, American philosopher. He wrote this for philosophers, but I think unintentionally he probably said something useful for designers. Yeah, he said that really, if you think about it, there are lots of ethical problems out there that has no solution. So the task here, I think the task here is not for you to find the perfect solution to the problem. Yeah? But the idea here is, I think, for you to learn from attempts in solving it. And this is where the size of the class actually plays a big role. So imagine you can sort of learn from the 20, 25 odd projects from the class. You will actually learn not only the limits of our understanding on the hard problems as this, but you will find that different proposals will excel in certain features while being severely limited in other features. That is the nature of design. Yeah? And if you look at every proposal and how it has corresponded or addressed the particular ethical position that it has, that he's sort of addressing to, I think we will have made sort of no insignificant step towards sort of understanding sort of the hard problems in this ethical challenge. Yeah. So with that, thank you. Oh, yeah. Okay. We're going to say something.
You got a good idea of the dilemma that we're asking you to solve for. I just want to give you now a little bit of background information, a little bit of housekeeping of how we're going to do things over the next few weeks. So essentially, we want to design something that's going to continuously measure and maintain the temperature of the vaccine. The problem is that if we put a thermometer or something in the vaccine, it's going to contaminate it and it won't be fit to insert into a human. So you will not be able to directly measure the vaccine by putting a thermocouple or something in the vaccine. You'll have to put it outside in the area around the vaccine and then measure the temperature of something close to the vaccine and then infer what the temperature of the vaccine is. So to do that, you'll be making use of some of the tools that Naga is going to teach you, or has been teaching you, over the next few weeks. So the temperature of the vaccine should be between 10 and 14 degrees C, and your system needs to equivalate at those temperatures very quickly, as quickly as possible. Of course, your design needs to be modified depending whether you're sending your vaccine to Wakanda or Singa Sister. It depends where you're sending it. You might have different criteria on the design requirements. I would imagine if you're sending your vaccine to Wakanda, where the flight, I think it was a 24-hour flight or something, it's quite far, the vaccine should probably be maintained at a slightly lower temperature than if you're going somewhere closer, because it's more likely to go off if it's at a high temperature. Okay. In terms of marks, the 2D is worth 15% of the grade, so it's quite significant. It's a significant proportion. And it's worth 50% of our costs, and it's also, I believe, worth 15% of Xiao's systems and control costs as well. So it's a considerable amount of effort that we expect you to put in here. So this is kind of the schedule for the next few weeks, especially for our course in particular, 3100. So next week, Naga will continue discussing differential equations and solutions to differential equations. In particular, it's going to be looking at heat transport in one and possibly two dimensions. And you'll need those skills in particular, those tools in particular, to be able to solve the heat diffusion problem that you have here. Week 12 is going to be designing and building the thermostat and also prototyping it, testing its capabilities. And of course, running in parallel to all of this, you should be discussing which problem you're actually going to solve, where you're going to do it, or are you going to do problems, are you going to make a new solution to a third type of design? I like that. Try to solve both problems somehow, but not to the same extent. Then week 13 is the assessment week. So we're going to do all the cohorts on Thursday, the 11th, right? National Day is on the Tuesday, so this will be Thursday the 11th. Will be the assessment. Week 13, Xiao was arranged for the Arms Lab to be open continuously to you from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Monday and Wednesday. But on Tuesday it'll probably be closed for National Day. But Monday and Wednesday, as long as there are no classes, active classes going on, then you can just go in and use the Arms Lab to do your projects. You don't need to wait for us. We'll probably be in our offices or in the Arms Lab. We'll be around if you need help. But it's kind of free and easy for you guys to go in and use on that Monday and Wednesday. Okay. So week 13, these are the times where we'll do the assessments. Cohort 1, 9 to 11, cohort 2, 11:30, 30:30, 1:30, and then 2 till 4 is the cohort 3. So the deliverable is going to be an 8-minute presentation with 2 minutes of question and answers. Marks will be deducted if you go longer than 8 minutes. Marks will be awarded for modeling and design, analysis of the design or the prototype, control, and also I've put an ethical dilemma here, but as Jeff just mentioned, it might not be a dilemma, there might actually be a third way. So there'll be also marks awarded for that. The materials, the basic materials that we're going to give you, other materials you can scrounge from the Fab Lab bins or wherever you can get hold of them, but the basic materials are going to be these. A thermoelectric controller, like a Peltier. Arduino. What's funny about this slide? Yeah. Really? What's DAS? Really? Also a thermoelectric cooler. Oh, I'm so sorry, I have no idea. But this time, we're going to place extra emphasis on the design and how you're approaching these ethical problems. Yeah, that's the difference. Okay. Yeah, and also, okay, I don't know, you guys didn't model and design that properly, right? How did it work this way? What was the problem that you were doing? What was the problem you're trying to solve? Oh, is it also an ethical problem, is it? Okay. So, but you didn't have to do any, you didn't have to apply any control theory. You didn't. If you guys just put this together as I did, I just quickly wired this together the other day, and you'll get 0 marks for this. But if you like, because it's nothing, right? But if you like model it, you design which materials you're going to put in there, you're going to model where you should put the the thermometers, and then of course each of these things have a reliability associated with them. So you'll be applying the tools that we've learned in the class related to error analysis, propagation of errors, how that affects the final performance of the fridge, if you want to call it fridge, and then also how that performance influences where you're going to send your vaccine to Wakanda or Singa Sister. The setup might look very similar, but the actual problem and what our expectations, I can guarantee, are not the same. I want you to be using ANOVA, design of experiments, solving partial differential equations to decide where you're going to put the thermometers. I want you to be able to use propagation of error, understand how the performance changes and how that influences where you're going to send your vaccine. All of these things are measurables. These will all be measuring. Then I haven't even mentioned Xiao's course. Okay, just some thermal properties of the materials. You've seen this slide before, right? This is kind of what we've been doing in the class. In my part, this is the map of what we've done, so I expect you to at least use the propagation of errors and design of experiments for this. Oh, and the other thing, the other one thing I want to mention, we've given you these materials. You see at the bottom here, I also listed materials from 1D. Now, you guys happen to design a very efficient, or some of you happen to design a very efficient fan, right? Now you have a cooling system, but you're going to have a feedback system where you'll want to heat it up if it gets too cold. And you have a very efficient fan that you've already designed. So I'm not suggesting that well, maybe I am. You might be able to kind of incorporate both, 1D into 2D as well. Yeah. Okay, and this is just the formal write-up of the problem. I'll leave you guys to read this later, but the basic details are introduced by Jeffrey. Xiao, do you want to add anything before we go to Q&A?
Yeah, so the control part is, you're going to actually implement the controller. What's going to be very different is that you will try to control something which you cannot measure directly. That's going to be something quite interesting. So imagine you have a block of material here, and then you want to control a certain point which you don't have a sensor depth. That's probably the challenge. It's very similar, I'm sure. If you use penalty controller, there's a lot of projects that do this. But the technical depth required for this project is a little higher. You will need to solve a PDE for this. Yeah.
And we're not going to mark them on their ability to solve it or together, like we're marking on the analysis and the design.
Yeah, but ultimately for my part, you will definitely need to implement a type of feedback controller. Most of you will select a PID controller. So I would like to see you implement it on this system. And I'm sure maybe we can have a friendly competition, see which controller is the fastest for real. And then maybe I can award for the group with the fastest controller, means the setting time is the shortest, no stay state error, maybe you get a prize. It'll give you some motivation.
And your render.
We're here to answer any questions in the next few minutes. Budget, 0. We'll give you the materials that we showed earlier, and you're welcome to scrounge things out of the bins Why do you need a budget for? You don't get salary. Control system, modeling. There's a prototype like that. You can probably have more than one sensor on there. And we're expecting to see some, in this time, expecting to see some comparison between your simulated technical distribution and your measured technical distribution and the time it takes to reach equilibrium. And then some discussion of how well your system can deliver vaccines.
The revolutions.
I'm not expecting a product or an optimal. I just want it to work and to be a prototype.
What if I buy fridge from Shopify? What do they want? what they want. They talk a lot about what they want.
They want a system that holds a vaccine, right? Then it must have a feedback loop because you cannot put the thermostat directly into the vaccine. So you have to sense the temperature, then you must feedback to the control. We're using, I think, a fan that we have from one.
All of those materials can build that system.
Then
Without
like, there's no
anything else.
fucking budget, so I don't know what they want us to build it out of. What, Tupperware? Like,
Prof, even Tupperware need
So
money.
the question is, if they have questions about the context,
Unless you ask me to get a styrofoam
clarify
box
that,
from NTU.
or they just assume something.
It's better to clarify, yeah. But it'll be good not to, because it's a big class, it'll be good if someone in the class is relating some
the
of
heat
this.
transfer.
And
So the inside of the house, right, you need to know the temperature. The heat loss, right, is works on a
while I
OE.
answer them based on my understanding of those sequences. And so that this is a common thing, a common
I only
resource
understand
that is
the
apparent and
SNC part.
shared.
I feel like it's
So I think that would be a more efficient way.
It will just help you.
I agree.
Actually, no, it will tell you the temperature also, which is what you need to feedback to.
Sure.
Yeah, that would be great. You are the team.
Look, the moment you need to stick in the
But
heat.
if you want to do
like
that,
the thermometer in my system.
Yeah, then you will only sense
But you have to give me
the.
access.
My system, but I cannot assume that my system, my vaccine temperature is the same as my honestly, maybe I should go to SIT and read this slot. And most of the times you're going to do, right?
For the benefit of the class, you can find repeating the question. Then you can pass it to one.
For example, in the example of
Oh, okay.
because propaganda is at least for 24 hours, that amount of vaccine. Method has a thing called the way send
I feel like they just thought of this.
rather than sending the vaccines because we can
Okay, it's a great question. Because let's say if I answer this in the affirmative, then you have probably overwritten the entire engineering design problem. Right? But my understanding is that two things. When we configure this, we actually intend for you to set your mind on designing a system that is able to transport these vaccines to one of the choices. Yeah. So local domestic vaccine production is not something in the worldview of the problem that has been configured. That is the candidate answer. That's the constraint. Yes. And the second thing is that also taking a leap from empirical occurrences, producing vaccine is not something that is, I suppose, confined to the consideration of cost efficiency alone, right? And something to do with the people there, and to do with the fact that they are doing it on an everyday basis and have some experience to draw on. This is a very long process, yeah? So given that this is a acute situation, that is a possible solution, but not possible.
Here's a cheat code.
You probably need the mic.
Is this for Stacy? Hi, Stacy.
Oh, okay. So we're going to give you the materials in week 12. So next week is week 11.
Sorry, the green.
No. The thing is, like, you're going to be very busy next week doing the modeling side of this. So you can't do any of the design work really until you've modeled and designed it, simulated it. And yeah.
I think it's shit.
Acrylic, I think it's like 40 millimeters by 40 millimeters, and then different thicknesses. So you'll have a selection of aluminium and acrylic, different thicknesses. You can cut in different places, different positions to build your setup. This needs to be in a box. So you can drill a well or drill multiple wells and try to ship as much vaccine as possible. It's the acrylic or it's the aluminium. Okay, any other question? Oh, same groups as one day. Oh, you guys are going, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's like a 2D project and all of us are like different cohorts, so it's just